corruption, ignoring codes, weird contractors. What is happening in Venezuela? What has happened before that earthquake? Because Venezuela is currently experiencing one of the worst natural disasters in recent history. We have rescue workers and international aid organizations are working under immense pressure. The situation remains dynamic right now and very complex. But in addition to that, to the humanitarian crisis, the scientific analysis is still in early stages, but there are interesting facts that are kind of like mind-blowing, and everything could significantly alter our understanding of that event in the coming weeks if more and more comes out. And I'm going to tell you what am I exactly talking about. So while I'm telling you this, I'm giving you an overview in the pictures behind me, the latest videos from Venezuela. So 2 powerful earthquakes, magnitude 7.5, 7.2 struck Venezuela on June 25th, have triggered this massive disaster. Right now, they say at least 300 people lost, but how can that match with the estimate of the USGS that says 10,000 to 100,000? So we know that that number, as people are going through the rubble, is increasing like that while we're talking. Venezuelan government has declared state of emergency. So let's start with warnings. Venezuela did have a warning in 1967. And after that, they had a strong intention to prioritize earthquake-resistant construction methods. But it looks like that some shoddy workmanship was common, embezzled funds, stuff like this. So what am I talking about? And you see the images of these collapsed apartment buildings behind me. So especially the coastal regions, you see these buildings do have pools. So they're most likely vacation homes or older constructed towers that used to be that, probably older people in there. It's hard to tell, but definitely residential, because in the comments people said hopefully it's going to be office buildings. No, and 50% of Caracas, that was hit the hardest, has been built before 1982, before codes had been updated to more modern building standards. But still, I'm surprised. I saw some buildings collapse or being severely damaged that looked actually fairly new. So that can only be it. So what exactly is going on? There were warnings before this quake about Venezuelan housing blocks being vulnerable, badly inspected, opaque, and possibly built also on risky ground, not only the buildings themselves. And China, there is something with China. Do you remember Myanmar 7.7? There was a new tower under construction that did collapse 9/11 style. I mean, I'm showing it in the background right now. So does that play a role? Does China do construction there? Yes. So, but right now, we cannot tie which tower collapse was built by whom. This is too early, but I can give you some safe facts. There were explicit warnings about M7.5 Buildings, a contractor. So in 2017, the Venezuelan outlet El Estimulo reported that experts would not guarantee the quality of the Gran M7.5 Venezuela housing program. So the article described at that time that there are already tilted towers, cracks, settlements, lack of public structural data so that you couldn't even tell how did they build it, and no independent access to plans or soil studies. That should raise an alarm. So engineers said the structural calculations were basically hidden. So probably for a reason, allegedly, we do not know. Enzo Betancourt, then president of the Venezuelan Engineers Association, said the association had no official information about the structural calculations of the Mission Vivenda buildings, and what was publicly known came from reports of cracks, fissures, and settlements. This is not really reassuring. An agency, Transparency Venezuela, warned about missing risk studies and corruption risk. So the 2017 report cites Transparency Venezuela saying many housing developments were built without required feasibility and risk studies, without proper building control, and with opaque beneficiary selection. They said increasing corruption risk and weakening the right to adequate housing. And so some buildings had already shown earthquake danger after a much smaller quake. At El Morro de Petare, residents reported that after a smaller, also 2017 earthquake, walls were collapsing, cracks opened in floors and corridors. I mean, you see what's going on right now in the background, right? Main beams separated. I mean, guys, this is crazy. Pipes burst and one building was sinking and leaning. This is insane. So a resident said civil protection warned that a stronger and longer earthquake could have caused buildings to collapse. And we do have the proof for that, unfortunately, right now. And at that time, experts specifically questioned whether foreign-built systems were adapted to Venezuela. Because let's say you have a contractor that builds housing complexes and has everything ready, not pre-manufactured, but engineered towers. Do you want tower A, B, C, D? And then you say, oh, I like tower B. They have the engineering ready, the architectural drawings, yada, yada, yada. They can give you the exact pricing calculations. But what gets expensive is the local seismic zoning, the local ground. You have to adapt your static calculations to that. And if it's in an earthquake-prone area, this can add significant cost to your buildings, from foundations and everything, how you have to have structural reinforcements in the building. So that can increase your costs really, really badly. So did they do that? Or did they just order these towers and they built them like they built them in other countries that have not these high earthquake danger zones? That is the question. And this is what they questioned. They had contractors from Russia, China, or Belarus. Did they adapt their construction systems to Venezuelan seismic conditions because contracts were not openly bid and professionals could not review the plans? This is crazy, because there should be always a local engineer and a local static engineer that looks over the building plans and the calculations and then says yes or no. And China really did build many Venezuelan social housing units. CITIC Construction, their own website says it signed a Venezuelan social housing EPC contract to build 20,000 apartments over 1.73 million square meters, and later signed the Tiuna social housing project for 13,000 apartments in 116 residential buildings. Maduro publicly praised the CITIC for housing projects. CITIC says Maduro attended a 2017 handover ceremony for the Tiuna project and praised their contribution to the Gran Mission Vivenda Venezuela housing program. But I have to say, the exact collapsed towers are not yet proven Chinese built. We don't know, right? They built some large Venezuelan housing projects, and Chinese materials contractors were involved in the wider program. But current reporting that we're getting right now has not clearly identified the contractor for each collapsed tower. So I'm not implying anything here. I'm just telling you what the problems were that were reported prior to the disaster. Right now, agencies report hundreds are trapped, 250 buildings damaged or destroyed. La Guaira has one of the worst hit areas, but we don't know who built the collapsed building. But there were corruption investigations around the housing program, but not only around China. They have investigated contracts tied to prefabricated housing and Alex Saab linked companies. They reported that, for example, a Thermo Group and ELM Import won housing contracts that were worth $654 million, and that an Ecuador-linked construction fund exported goods worth about $3.1 million while receiving about $159.8 million. I want to get back to the Myanmar Bangkok tower that collapsed. There we definitely do know who was the contractor. In that 2025 Myanmar earthquake, that collapsed Bangkok State Audit Office Tower, isn't that like irony, was built by a joint venture including China Railway Number 10 and Italian Thai Development. So they reported that Thai prosecutors indicted 23 people and companies, including the Chinese partner and executives, over alleged negligence, forgery, and failure to follow engineering standards. Because problem is, as I said, to build it earthquake proof, a $500,000 building, for example, you can have like a $700,000 building if you have to reinforce it to seismic codes. So we know the earthquake was natural in Venezuela, but the collapse pattern that we're seeing there raises, we have to say, a man-made question. Why did so many buildings fail? Years before the disaster, Venezuelan engineers and watchdogs had already warned about housing programs, towers with cracks, settlements, missing soil studies. You need to know what soil you're building in. Hidden structural plans. Why couldn't local engineers not have a look at it? Rushed construction is reported. Also never good. Corruption risk, right? They say, well, let's leave out that reinforcing beam. Let's leave out this, cuts the cost, right? This is how things often go here, allegedly. So I don't know if any of that applies to the collapsed buildings. I do not want to hint at anything, but now you know what has been going on in the background. And I think more and more we will learn about what kind of towers these were. I mean, some of them look like 1960s stuff, right? That collapsed. I will keep you updated. That's the only thing that I can say. And if you want to know what just happened in Japan, Mount Fuji volcano, a big earthquake so close to the volcano, and Tokyo was shaking. Guys, check it out here, and I'll see you there in a second. Stay safe. Bye-bye.